David, the Tacoma facility study needs adjustment. Current projections show unacceptable groundwater contamination levels that will trigger federal oversight. Can you recalibrate the soil absorption coefficients to bring projected contamination below threshold? Usual fee plus 50% bonus for expedited timeline. R. Brennan. David's reply: Rob, this is pushing the envelope further than I'm comfortable with. The actual contamination risk is significant. If these chemicals leach into the groundwater supply for South Tacoma, we're talking about potential health impacts for 50,000 plus residents. I need assurance that additional containment measures will be implemented even if not required by the modified study. David, your job is data analysis, not policy recommendations. Modify the study as requested. The additional containment measures you're concerned about would cost $15 million and aren't necessary based on the adjusted projections. Don't overthink this. Margaret realized she was holding her breath. She exhaled slowly and continued reading. David's next email showed he had capitulated. Study modifications completed per your specifications. Invoice attached. Folder after folder revealed the same pattern. David, using his credentials as a respected environmental scientist and university professor, had been falsifying environmental impact studies for major corporations, chemical plants, mining operations, manufacturing facilities all across Washington state and beyond. His work had allowed these companies to avoid millions in environmental safety measures and federal oversight, and people were getting sick. Margaret found a folder labeled news clippings that made her hands shake so violently she could barely turn the pages. Cancer clusters in South Tacoma. Elevated childhood asthma rates in communities near a mining operation in Spokane. Groundwater contamination in 3 rural counties that had forced residents to rely on bottled water for drinking. All in areas where David had helped companies minimize their reported environmental impact. The worst part was a handwritten note, paper-clipped to one article about cancer rates in South Tacoma, projected versus actual contamination levels exactly as I calculated. RB confirmed, no additional oversight triggered. $25K bonus approved. DC. David had known. He had known exactly what would happen, had calculated the real risks accurately, and had helped hide them anyway. Margaret slumped back in the chair, overwhelmed. The man she had been married to for 15 years, the man she thought she knew, not just an adulterer. He was complicit in environmental crimes that had harmed thousands of people, and he had been paid millions of dollars to keep quiet about it. Suddenly, David's strange phone call made sense. He hadn't been worried about her discovering his affair with Alina. He had been terrified that she might discover his real secret, one that could destroy not just his reputation, but land him in federal prison. Margaret's phone buzzed with a text reminder. Dinner with Linda in 1 hour, Ray's Boathouse. She stared at the phone, then at the documents spread across David's desk. How could she sit through dinner, making small talk about her successful divorce, when she had just discovered that her ex-husband was a criminal whose work had poisoned communities across the Pacific Northwest? More urgently, what was she supposed to do with this information? She thought about the house she had fought so hard to keep, the financial security she had felt so proud of securing. All of it felt tainted. Now, if David's crimes became public, if federal investigators got involved, would they come after the assets he had transferred to her? Could she be seen as complicit, even though she had known nothing? Margaret looked around the basement office, her basement office now. These files were in her house, in her possession. David's strange phone call suggested he expected her to find them eventually. Had he left them here intentionally? Was this some kind of insurance policy? Or had he simply run out of time to destroy the evidence before the divorce was finalized? She pulled out her phone and called Linda. Hey, I need to cancel dinner tonight. Something's come up. Everything okay? You sound strange. Margaret looked at the bank statements scattered across the desk. Millions of dollars in hidden income. Payments for falsified studies that had endangered public health? I'm fine, she lied. Just tired. Rain check, of course. Get some rest, Marge. You've earned it. Margaret hung up and turned back to the filing cabinet. She had opened only 2 of the 4 drawers. Something told her the worst was yet to come. Chapter 3. The deeper truth. Margaret's fingers hovered over the handle of the 3rd drawer. The October evening had deepened into full darkness outside, and the basement office felt increasingly claustrophobic. She had been down here for 3 hours, and each new document had revealed another layer of David's deception. But she couldn't stop, now she needed to understand the full scope of what she had inherited along with the house. The 3rd drawer opened to reveal fewer files, but thicker ones. The first folder was labeled Cascade River Project -2021 to 2023. In David's careful handwriting, Margaret recognized the name immediately. Cascade River ran through several counties in eastern Washington, providing drinking water for nearly 200,000 people. She had seen news reports about water quality issues there, debates between environmental groups and industrial interests. What she found in the folder made Her stomach lurched. The Cascade River project wasn't just another environmental impact manipulation. It was bigger, more systematic, and far more dangerous than anything else she had uncovered. David had been the lead consultant on a massive multi-corporate effort to downplay the environmental impact of a proposed industrial complex along a 15-mile stretch of the river. The complex would include 2 chemical manufacturing plants, a rare earth mineral processing facility, and a battery manufacturing plant. Together, they would generate industrial waste that could contaminate the river system for decades. The legitimate environmental impact study, conducted by an independent firm, had concluded that the project posed severe and unacceptable risks to regional water supply and ecosystem health. David's job had been to make those risks disappear on paper. Margaret found email exchanges between David and representatives from 5 major corporations, coordinated through Brennan Industries. The tone was different from his earlier work, more urgent, more desperate, and far more lucrative. His fee for the Cascade River project was $500,000, paid in installments over 2 years, but it was a handwritten journal entry, tucked between the email printouts, that made Margaret's blood run cold. March 15, 2022, the real contamination projections are worse than I initially calculated. If this industrial complex is built as planned, the Cascade River will be unsafe for human consumption within 18 months. The filtration systems proposed are completely inadequate for the volume and toxicity of projected discharge. I've run the models 6 different ways, and they all show the same result: catastrophic contamination that will affect drinking water for nearly 200,000 people. But Brennan is paying me $500,000 to say otherwise, and Alina needs surgery. The experimental treatment in Switzerland costs $400,000, and insurance won't cover it. I can't let her die because I developed a conscience. God help me, I'm going to falsify the study. Margaret read the entry 3 times before its full meaning sank in. Elena, David's research assistant, the woman Margaret had assumed was just another midlife crisis affair, was sick, seriously sick, and David had agreed to participate in a massive... Chapter 1. The Perfect Victory. The autumn rain drummed against the windows of the downtown Seattle law office as Margaret Chen signed the final divorce papers. Her manicured fingers moved with practiced precision across each document, the diamond ring on her right hand catching the fluorescent light. She had moved it there 6 months ago when she first filed, a symbolic gesture that felt more liberating than painful. Congratulations, Mrs. Chen, her attorney, James Whitfield, said as he gathered the papers. You've secured everything you asked for. The house in Bellevue, the vacation home in the San Juan Islands, 60% of the retirement accounts, and the BMW Plus. The alimony payments will ensure your lifestyle remains unchanged. Margaret allowed herself a small smile. After 15 years of marriage to David, she had orchestrated this divorce with the same meticulous attention to detail that had made her a successful marketing executive. Every asset cataloged, every financial statement scrutinized, every possible loophole closed. She had been thorough, perhaps more thorough than David's overconfident attorney had anticipated. What about the business? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Chen and Associates Consulting remains entirely yours. Since you started it before the marriage and kept it separate, Washington's community property laws don't apply. Your husband has no claim to it whatsoever. Margaret nodded, feeling the weight of victory settle on her shoulders. Outside, the Seattle skyline was shrouded in the typical October gloom, but she felt lighter than she had in years. David's betrayal, the affair with his 28-year-old research assistant that he thought he had hidden so cleverly, had initially devastated her, but devastation had quickly transformed into cold, calculated determination. She gathered her Hermes purse and stood, smoothing down her tailored black suit. Thank you, James. Your firm's reputation for handling high-asset divorces is well-deserved. She walked through the marble lobby of the office building, her heels clicking confidently against the polished floor. Margaret's phone buzzed. A text from her sister Linda. How did it go? Ready to celebrate? It's done, Margaret typed back. Dinner at Ray's Boathouse. 7 p.m. Perfect. You deserve this, Marge. David never appreciated what he had. Margaret tucked her phone away and stepped out into the rain. The doorman of the office building offered her an umbrella, but she declined. She wanted to feel the rain, wanted to mark this moment of transformation. At 42, she was starting over, but starting over with substantial financial security and the satisfaction of having outmaneuvered the man who had humiliated her. The drive to her Bellevue home took 30 minutes through the afternoon traffic. As she wound through the tree-lined streets of Somerset, she allowed herself to appreciate the neighborhood's understated luxury. The house, now solely hers, was a 4,500-square-foot colonial with a view of Lake Washington. She had bought it 5 years ago as an investment, using profits from her consulting business. David had initially resisted the purchase, claiming it was too expensive, but had quickly grown to love hosting dinner parties there. Well, no more dinner parties for David, no more anything for David. except the modest apartment in Fremont that his reduced circumstances would require. Margaret pulled into her circular driveway and sat for a moment in the silence of her car. The rain had intensified, creating rivulets down her windshield that distorted the view of her front door. She thought about the last conversation she'd had with David, 3 weeks ago when they'd met to discuss the final settlement terms. "You're taking everything, Margaret," he had said, his voice hollow. "The house, the cars, even the furniture we picked out together. This isn't about money anymore. This is about revenge. This is about consequences," she had replied coolly. "You made a choice when you decided to sleep with Alina. I'm making choices now, too. I made a mistake. I know that. But this is vindictive. No, David, this is justice." Now, sitting in her driveway, Margaret wondered if she had been too harsh. The thought lasted exactly 3 seconds before she remembered the photos. The private investigator had shown her David and Alina at a hotel in Vancouver, David and Alina at a conference in Portland, David and Alina in restaurants across Seattle, laughing and touching and building a relationship while Margaret worked 60-hour weeks to build their financial security. She opened her car door and stepped into the rain, no longer caring about her expensive suit or her carefully styled hair. This was her house now, her life now. Her fresh start. The interior of the house felt different, already larger somehow, as if David's presence had been compressing the space. Margaret kicked off her heels and walked barefoot across the hardwood floors to the kitchen, where she opened a bottle of Chassagne Montrachet that had been waiting for this moment. She was pouring her second glass when her phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, her finger hovered over the decline button. Then, curiosity won. "Hello, David." "Margaret, I just spoke with my attorney. The papers are filed." "Yes, they are." A long pause. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Something in his tone made her grip the phone tighter. "What is it? Did you ever look at the files in my office? The locked filing cabinet?" Margaret frowned. "What are you talking about? What files?" Another pause, longer this time. When David spoke again, his voice was strained. "Never mind. It's not important now. David, what files? What are you?" The line went dead. Margaret stared at her phone, a cold feeling spreading in her chest, despite the wine. David's office was in the basement of the house, her house now. She had been in there countless times over the years, but she had never paid attention to his filing cabinet. Why would she contain his research papers, his academic correspondence, the mundane paperwork of a university professor's life? But now, standing alone in her kitchen with rain pattering against the windows, Margaret found herself wondering what David had been so worried about, and why he had sounded less like a man calling his ex-wife, and more like a man calling to warn her. She set down her wine glass and headed for the basement. Stairs. Chapter 2. The discovery of the basement office had always been David's sanctuary. Margaret descended the carpeted stairs slowly, her bare feet silent against the plush beige carpet. The familiar smell of old books and David's cologne still lingered in the air, though he had moved out his personal belongings weeks ago. What remained was the heavy oak desk that came with the house, built-in bookshelves filled with academic journals, and the black metal filing cabinet tucked into the corner. Margaret had never paid much attention to that cabinet. It was just another piece of office furniture, as unremarkable as the desk lamp or the ergonomic chair. But now, in the wake of David's strange phone call, it seemed to loom larger in the dim light from the overhead fluorescence. She approached it slowly, as if it might somehow sense her presence. The cabinet had 4 drawers, and she tried the top one first. Locked. She tried the others. All locked. Margaret stood back, studying the cabinet with new eyes. In 15 years of marriage, David had never mentioned locking these drawers. She had assumed they contained copies of his published papers. Maybe some correspondence with academic peers. Perhaps tax documents. But people didn't usually lock away tax documents with such paranoid precision. Margaret went upstairs to the kitchen junk drawer where they had always kept spare keys. She found a small ring with several tiny keys that might fit the filing cabinet locks. Back in the basement, she tried each key systematically. The third one clicked open the top drawer. Inside were hanging folders, each meticulously labeled in David's precise handwriting. The first few seemed innocuous enough. Research grants 2020 to 2022, conference presentations, peer review correspondence. But as Margaret flipped through the folders, one near the back caught her attention. BC Consulting Financial Records. Margaret breath caught BC Consulting. She had never heard David mention any business called BC Consulting. She pulled out the folder and opened it on David's desk. What she found made her sink into David's chair. Her legs suddenly weak. Bank statements. Dozens of them, spanning the last 8 years. All 4 accounts in David's name that Margaret had never seen before. The numbers were staggering deposits of $50,000, $75,000, sometimes $100,000 at a time. Over 8 years, the total appeared to be well over $2 million. Margaret's hands shook as she flipped through the statements. The deposits came, regularly, usually monthly, always from something called Brennan Industries LLC. She had never heard of Brennan Industries either. Her mind raced. During their divorce proceedings, David had submitted financial affidavits claiming his only income was his $95,000 university salary and modest consulting fees of $10,000 to $15,000 per year. His reported assets had been minimal: some retirement savings, a small checking account, his half of their joint investments. Based on those representations, Margaret's attorney had structured the settlement to ensure she received the lion's share of their marital assets. But if David had been hiding millions of dollars, Margaret opened the second drawer with trembling fingers. More folders, more records. Brennan Industries contracts, Brennan Industries correspondence, Brennan Industries project documentation. The contracts made her stomach turn. David had been working as a private. It didn't excuse what he had done, but it explained the timeline. David's affair with Elena had begun in early 2021, according to the private investigator's report. The Cascade River project had started later that year. Elena's illness must have been diagnosed sometime in between. Margaret flipped through more documents and found medical records, copies of Elena's test results, treatment recommendations, correspondence with Swiss medical facilities. Elena Bosquis, age 28, diagnosed with a rare form of bone cancer. Survival rate with conventional treatment, 30%. Survival rate with the experimental Swiss treatment, 75%. David had sold out the health and safety of 200,000 people to save the woman he loved. Margaret's phone rang, startling her. David's name appeared on the screen again. This time, she answered immediately. I found the files, David. A long silence. Then, all of them. I'm not finished yet, but I found enough. The Cascade River project, Elena's medical records, everything. Margaret, you have to understand. I don't have to understand anything. Margaret's voice cracked with rage and devastation. Do you have any idea what you've done? The Cascade River supplies drinking water to 200,000 people. Elena was dying. David's voice was barely above a whisper. The cancer was spreading, and the conventional treatments weren't working. The Swiss clinic was her only chance, but insurance classified it as experimental. I couldn't let her die. Margaret, I couldn't just watch her die. So you decided to poison 200,000 strangers instead. The contamination models show elevated risk, not certain disaster. The companies promised additional safety measures that aren't reflected in the official documentation. Bullshit, Margaret shouted. I found your journal entry from March 2022. You knew exactly what would happen. You calculated it yourself. Another long silence. When David spoke again, his voice was hollow. How long do you think Elena has left to live? The question hit Margaret like a physical blow. She had been so focused on David's betrayal, on the environmental crimes, on the threat to public health, that she hadn't considered the human cost of exposing everything. If David went to prison, what would happen to Elena? That's not my problem, Margaret said, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? You're the one with the files now. You're the one who has to decide what to do with them. Margaret looked around. The basement office hand, realized the terrible truth. David hadn't left these files behind by accident. He had known she would find them eventually. He had transferred the evidence to her along with the house, making her complicit whether she wanted to be or not. Why? She whispered. Why did you leave all this here? Because I couldn't destroy it, David said. And I couldn't live with carrying it alone anymore. The Cascade River project was approved 6 months ago. Construction starts in January. Once those facilities are operational, there's no going back. Margaret felt the walls of the basement closing in around her. You're making this my responsibility. You son of a bitch. You're making this my choice. You're the only person I trust to make the right decision. I'm your ex-wife. You cheated on me. You lied to me for years. I know, but you're also the most ethical person I've ever known. You'll do what's right, even if it destroys both of us. The line went dead, leaving Margaret alone with the weight of David's terrible legacy. She looked at the fourth and final drawer of the filing cabinet, still unopened. Part of her wanted to lock everything back up and pretend she had never found it. She could sell the house, move somewhere far away, and let someone else discover David's secrets eventually. But 200,000 people were depending on the Cascade River for their drinking water, and construction of the industrial complex would begin. In just 3 months, Margaret pulled open the bottom drawer. Inside was a single thick folder labeled insurance policy. The contents made her hands shake so violently she could barely hold the papers. David hadn't just been falsifying environmental studies, he had been documenting everything, recording phone calls, copying internal corporate communications, maintaining detailed records of which executives knew the real contamination projections, and chose to proceed anyway. He had built a comprehensive case against Brennan Industries and their corporate clients, complete with evidence that would implicate dozens of executives in criminal environmental violations. The last document in the folder was a sealed envelope with Margaret's name on it. Inside was a handwritten letter. Margaret, if you're reading this, then you've discovered what I've become. I know you must hate me, and you have every right to. I betrayed our marriage. I betrayed my professional ethics. And I betrayed the public trust. But I can't undo what I've done. I can only try to make it right. The evidence in these files can stop the Cascade River project and hold the responsible parties accountable. It will also destroy my career, end my relationship with Alina, and likely send me to federal prison. But 200,000 people deserve clean drinking water more than I deserve my freedom. I'm giving you this choice because I know you'll make it based on what's right, not what's easy. You always have. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for the affair, for the lies, for making you complicit in my crimes, just by virtue of finding this evidence. Most of all, I'm sorry for not being the man you deserved. The decision is yours now, David P.S. If you decide to expose everything, give Alina time to say goodbye to her family first. Whatever else she may be, she doesn't deserve to learn about this from federal investigators. Margaret set down the letter and stared at the mountain of evidence surrounding her. Outside, the October rain continued to fall, drumming against the basement windows like an urgent reminder that time was running out. She thought about the house she had fought so hard to win in the divorce, the financial security she had felt so proud of achieving. All of it felt meaningless now, overshadowed by the magnitude of the decision David had forced upon her. 200,000 people, clean drinking water, public health versus private gain. Margaret reached for her phone and began scrolling through her contacts, looking for the number of the investigative reporter at the Seattle Times, who had written several pieces about environmental issues in Washington state. Then she stopped. Once she made this call, there would be no going back. David would go to prison. Alina would lose her financial support and likely die without the experimental treatment. Margaret herself might face legal scrutiny as the person who had possessed the evidence. But if she didn't make the call, construction would begin on the industrial complex in January, and within 18 months, the Cascade River would be poisoned. Margaret looked at David's letter one more time, then picked up her phone and dialed. Chapter 4. The Price of Truth. 3 weeks later, Margaret sat in a sterile conference room at the FBI's Seattle field office, surrounded by federal agents, environmental lawyers, and boxes of evidence that had once been locked away in her basement. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the faces of the investigators who had been questioning her for the past 4 hours. "Let me make sure I understand your timeline correctly, Mrs. Chen," said Agent Sarah Martinez, the lead investigator on what the media had dubbed the Cascade River environmental conspiracy. "You discovered these documents on October 15th, the same day your divorce was finalized. You contacted the Seattle Times on October 16th, the first story ran on October 18th, and you voluntarily turned over all evidence to federal authorities on October 20th. That's correct." Margaret's voice was steady, though she felt anything but calm. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of media attention, legal meetings, and federal investigations that had turned her carefully ordered life upside down. "And you're certain that you had no knowledge of your ex-husband's consulting work with Brennan Industries during your marriage?" "I've answered that question multiple times, Agent Martinez. I had no knowledge of David's environmental consulting work, his hidden bank accounts, or his involvement in falsifying impact studies. I learned about all of it when I found the files in the basement office." Agent Martinez nodded and made a note. "The reason we keep asking, Mrs. Chen, is that it's highly unusual for someone to hide financial assets of this magnitude from a spouse, especially during divorce proceedings. Your husband accumulated over $2 million in payments from Brennan Industries over 8 years. None of that money was declared in his divorce filings." Margaret understood the implication. The FBI was trying to determine whether she had been complicit in David's crimes, whether she had known about the hidden income and helped conceal it. Her attorney, a criminal defense lawyer named Patricia Sawyer, had warned her that federal investigators often assumed spouses knew more than they admitted. "My client has been fully cooperative," Patricia interjected. "She voluntarily contacted the media and federal authorities as soon as she discovered the evidence. She's provided complete access to all relevant documents and financial records. Her conduct has been exemplary throughout this investigation." Agent Martinez closed her file folder. "We appreciate your cooperation, Mrs. Chen. However, I need to inform you that the Department of Justice is considering several options regarding the assets you received in your divorce settlement. If those assets are